Hey everyone, and welcome into the Reload podcast, along with Nathan Gilslider and Marshall Scott. I'm Justin Southwell. It's our second episode this week because it was a big week, and thankfully we can come to you with great news that Oklahoma State upset number 16 BYU in Stillwater 99-92. Marshall, you laid out your 5 thoughts on that. Would love to get your afterthoughts. Number one was that Anthony Roy just went off. Anthony freaking Roy. 30 points. We had a court storm. It was his first court storm in 6 years, 6 different programs. So talk a little bit more about what Anthony Roy did for us.
Yeah, especially early. Some of those threes early that sort of got him going were just, there was a hand in his face and he was like 3 feet beyond the 3-point line. That was some pretty ridiculous stuff early on. And I thought late he did a good job of, I remember one time coming down on the south side, he pumped on a wing three and he got the guy to bite, and you could tell he wanted to like shoot or jump into that guy so bad. He dishes, I think it was to Christian Coleman in the corner, in sort of a little give and go that Coleman wasn't ready for. But it was just like that kind of play that, okay, he wasn't trying to play this like hero ball. All right, now I'm going to shoot it over this guy. I thought that was super big. He had that big and one late, getting downhill, not just relying on the 3-point shot. And then Steve pointed out the little trail from Clary, and I called that out because the way that we're looking at it, I had like the perfect view of it. Clary comes off that screen, and Royce sort of trailing him, hits that big three at the top of the key, kicks it back to him and hits it. And yeah, it was like the Anthony Roy game of all Anthony Roy games. I'd imagine, like, he's not a guy that's ever lacked confidence, but I imagine in a game where there's going to be NBA scouts watching because AJ DeBonce is on the other side there. I know that game meant maybe a little bit more to Anthony Roy. So yeah, that was sick. They played, I thought, pretty good defense. This team's, I think we've learned this team's best defense is turning people over. It's the Glenn Spencer approach. It's okay, sure, we might give up a lot of points. They might be somewhat efficient, but if we get some turnovers and get down on the other end and score off those, then that's going to give Oklahoma State a shot. So yeah, I thought it was one of their more complete games. The fact that they had the big lead, they lost it entirely. BYU took a lead at some point, and then they were able to battle back and win by, honestly, as many as they did while not shooting from the foul line all that great. I think that it was just it was a big win for a ridiculous amounts of reasons. Obviously the tournament resume, all that stuff, but man, what a complete game. It was a lot of fun to sort of watch OSU basketball. That was one of the more fun games of the season for sure.
Absolutely. Anthony Roy definitely stood out, but I think everybody really stepped up. It seemed like everybody was playing with a little bit more quickness to them, and things were going really well for Curry. I think whenever he went up and under and scooped it up, and maybe like midway through the first half, I was thinking, yeah, we're probably going to win this game.
Yeah, and I like the one too where Curry faked it to, I forgot who was standing in the corner, faked it to one guy in the corner, and like both of the defenders jumped over there and they whipped it to whoever was standing in the lane. I asked Curry after the game, like, which of his highlight reel plays was his favorite, and he said it was the layup. He said something about jelly that I'm not cool enough to totally understand, but I just sort of nodded and went with it.
Amazing. Well, they did play a lot better defense, like you mentioned. Nathan, it's got to make you pretty happy, right?
Very, very. I think they had such active hands like the first 10 to 15 minutes that everybody was getting their hands on the ball, deflections. Coach was beaming, right? Like I can only imagine how many times he screamed, like, get your, every coach in every sport has like, you have like your metrics of like what it takes to win. Like it's deflections, you know what I mean? It's like, even though you don't get the rebound, it's tip out rebounds or whatever. And they come up with this number. Like I guarantee you, whatever that number is that Coach Lutz has, that was met by Oklahoma State in that game. And Marshall brought up a great point. When the defense is set and stuff like that, like we don't have great on-ball defenders, and some of our best players are not great one-on-one defenders. But I thought Coleman did especially the first 10 minutes, I thought Coleman was fantastic. And one of the things I want to give Roy like a lot of props on, like he has gotten so much better and so much more willing to do things on the defensive end, even like on the late backside help. He loves to try to time up that block rather than kind of like step in front and take the charge. Like, okay, again, I don't want to, you're a scorer. But I was actually thinking throughout the game, like as a whole, that's probably the best team win by everybody contributing and doing their job since the Texas A&M win. Like you said, I think, both Curry or both point guards I thought played really, really well. I think they had like 12 assists to 4 turnovers, which, you're going to take every single time. And then you have guys like with Roy, and then the way that VJ Miller really came out and attacked in the second half. I think he had a little stretch where I think he either had 6 straight or 8 straight really when we needed it at most. We had given up the lead.
That three he hit was ridiculous, where he's just like running to the 3-point line, turns around.
Fantastic. It was awesome, right? And then, like even that finish, that hang and then finish that he had, which is classic. As we've come to know him, like he loves to finish like that. If you're going to nitpick at something, like if you hit 75% of your free throws, like that's a 20-point game. Like that should have never gotten to where it was, but they overcame that. Like Marshall said, I think it's a really big, great sign of like growth. You had a big lead. You gave it up to a really good offensive basketball team. You clamped down enough to be able to get it back. They really didn't give up as many wide open threes as they did in general. Even some of those late threes that they hit, like Saunders, those are difficult shots. So at least you made him do it on the move. He's got an unbelievable release. He's a really good player. So I don't know, man. We talked about it in our last episode about how I think Marshall and I both thought there was an opportunity for this. And then they really came through. I think probably the one thing, if I was to nitpick, I would love to see more getting the ball to Parsa and opportunities for him to do more in one-on-one. As we get later in some of these really good teams, like you're going to see at Arizona and things like that, like he's going to struggle a little bit with great length because he's just not a very lengthy player. He's very big, but he's not very long. But if you get it to him early, he does a lot better job because he moves quickly. He has some great plays. I personally would like to see that, especially early on in the game. But I think we're kind of nitpicking at that point. Millie came in and had some really good minutes. That was a sweet dunk he had. That's just a big boy move right there, that he doesn't make last year.
Left Harris came back as well.
Lefty,
and they're like, "Hey, go guard this number 2."
Lefty had the green light. That guy was firing it up. Not great shots, but you can tell that they trust him, right? Let's really trust him to do what he's being asked to do: run the offense, set screens, high IQ. It was a really much needed win. And I think the way that they played, the way that they won, you leaned on Roy, you did all those things. It bodes well for moving forward as we close out this year and really put ourselves back in position to be on the bubble. I don't expect to go into Arizona and win, obviously, but then you come back home against a KU team that has shown signs that they can be beat. I'm not saying we will beat them, but they've shown signs. And we saw the number 2 pick. We'll see a top 5 pick in Pete at Arizona. We'll see the number 1 pick, hopefully, in Darren Peterson. I want to see him play again, in Kansas. So it's not getting any easier. But as they showed, like this is a good quality basketball team. And when they buy in on the defensive end, you can hang with anybody. And it was a good win.
Things were sort of feeling like, like it's happening again. OSU basketball is happening again. I feel like that one just like sparked a little bit of, all right, hey, back on Joe Lenardi's bubble and stuff like that. I think it just like sparked a little bit of hope.
Yeah, and I don't know too much about BYU, but I'm thinking if you're ranked number 16 in the country, even after a couple of losses, that you probably got a pretty solid offense and probably a pretty solid defense. But it seemed like maybe we flopped the roles with our defense. Like we played better defense, and BYU's defense didn't really impress me at all. Like, we were able to put up 99 points on them. So I think I saw that was the highest points scored against BYU this year, which is pretty awesome for the boys. Yeah,
add another tally mark. Coach Lutz, you score 81 points.
26-0 now. Here we go.
Win basketball games. So
great statistic.
Let's get out and go.
Speaking of Lutz, it's arguably his biggest win. I would say, number 9, Iowa State last year, they were ranked higher, but by that point, their tournament hopes were shot. So, Marshall, what did you think about this? Would you consider it Steve Lutz's biggest win, his signature win so far?
Yeah, which is we sort of talked about this a little bit pre-pod, but this is why I think it was okay that they stormed the court against the number 16 team in the country. I think I'm sort of pro court storming as long as you're not doing anything ridiculously stupid, getting in shoving matches with anybody and stuff like that. But I'm pro court storming after a game like that. But yeah, I think it was Lutz's biggest win. You mentioned that Iowa State game. That's the thing that could be compared to it. But yeah, like you said, it was like a cool moment of last season, and like, hey, these guys, they tried hard. These guys played really hard all year, but just, weren't a very good basketball team in the end. But this one, like we said, it sort of gave them a little bit of hope. Feels like it's pushing the program forward a little bit.
I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on the court storm. Like, I don't know, hold yourself to a higher standard. Like this is their 3rd loss in a row, but I don't know. I guess, like you said, let the kids have fun. I feel like maybe we should institute a rule, like if the curtains are down, court storms are off. Like you got
I love it. I love it.
You gotta be all in, right? So, curtains are up. All right, let's get after it. But fully expect the curtains to be up for KU. They travel very well. So I don't know. It kind of like the old man in me was like, what are we doing? Like they're not that good. Are we that bad? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but
there's definitely a balance there. We're flirting with it. We're flirting with that line. So big win, arguable on the court storm. We're kind of 50-50 on that. And then you step back a little bit more and there are rumors, the coaches talking about Mormon chants of what was going on during the game. So F the Mormons or ref is Mormon. So based on that, it didn't really sound like that's what was said, but it could be interpreted that way, I guess, by anybody in that situation. So we got to talk about it. Curious to get your thoughts on that. Nathan, go ahead and let us know what you think.
I think this is one of those situations like you're going to hear whatever it is that you want to hear. If the coach in that team has heard this in the past, and you know the things that happen when they play Utah and stuff like that, like it gets pretty nasty. And so if the coach has heard that before and he's coaching a basketball game and he starts hearing something that kind of picks up on it, that's probably what he's going to hear, right? I think same thing with some of the fans, right? They're very sensitive about it. And as you should be if that's what's being said. I personally heard refs are Mormon or ref is Mormon, however you want to say that, after what was a questionable call, basically trying to say, he's cooking one up. That's just a stupid chant. Like, let's be more creative. Like that doesn't even, that's silly. Like, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think you can hear it either way. I personally don't think that's what was said. I don't know. Of all fan bases in the Big 12, ours is typically pretty good. Never really heard too many complaints, especially at football games or things like that. So, I mean, outside of Bedlam, but I don't know. I mean, it's disappointing that it was said and that it's out there, and then you see some national media coverage and then some things that are said about it. It's kind of like overshadowing a really nice moment that Oklahoma State basketball needed.
100%.
And so that's tough. That's real tough because you don't ever want to take away from the guys because they didn't have anything to do with it one way or another. And so it kind of took away from that. So that's disappointing. I don't think that's what I heard, but I could get, if that was your mindset and you'd heard it before, you're like, oh, here we go again. But I really don't think that's what was said.
Yeah, so I was in the arena last night. The media's up in the 300s. I didn't hear either of those chants while I was there. It wasn't until after, when I'm sitting in the Kevin Young's presser, that he starts talking about it. I'm like, oh, I didn't even really realize that this had happened. You mentioned, yeah, it's just like an unfortunate situation. You mentioned this is stuff that they, have gone through before. He mentioned an Arizona trip last year. Utah-based writer who's down there mentioned a couple of other times that this is something that they've had to deal with. So I certainly understand being defensive if you hear something that you think sounds like that. I still think it's on the table that is what happened. The Big 12's doing an investigation. We'll figure that out. I really don't know. Whenever I listened to it, it sounded like the ref's a Mormon chant, but that was just like a video on Twitter. I imagine there could be another video that comes out and they are saying the F1 and. I wouldn't be like overly super shocked about that either. So just a super unfortunate situation. No matter what way you cut it, can't be saying the F the Mormons one. The other one, like you mentioned, I think maybe let's get a little bit more creative moving forward. But yeah, it sucks that it's overshadowing this. It sucks that it is a situation just within itself. And yeah, sort of a bummer bow put on the what was otherwise a pretty fun game for Oklahoma State.
You guys nailed it. Nothing really to add to that. We do have Arizona coming up Saturday at 3 p.m. I don't know if you guys follow the odds and point spread and all that stuff, but as of right now, it looks like we are 21.5-point dogs. So take that for what it's worth.
It feels about right. Like
got them right where we want
them. They are very, very good. Like I really enjoy watching them play basketball. They're well coached, very well rounded. They've got dudes at every level. They have a legitimately, like, I think them, Houston, BYU could make a run with the kind of offense that they have. Like DeBonce's awesome. He's such a good player and whatnot. And then even KU, if Peterson is right,
Peterson can solo win a game if he needs to.
I mean, he's a killer, and I love watching that dude play. But anyways, long story short, like they could legitimately win a national championships. I mean, you look at,
Right.
going and playing them, and it's like, we're not there yet, clearly. So it's going to be a good measuring stick game to see like how far we've come as a team and go on the road and compete with that. If you beat BYU and then you go on and you compete, and let's just say you lose by 10 on the road at Arizona, like I don't think that's anything to hang your head about. And like you come back and you have the Arizona State game here, like I think you can still continue to build off of what you did. So 21 probably seems about right, but you never know.
You never know. We'll find out Saturday. Good luck, guys. All right. Reload Podcast is brought to you by Brewster Consulting Group. Do any of these sound familiar at your company? Our processes are manual and inefficient with no documentation. Our data reporting takes forever and isn't accurate. We hear all the hype about AI, but have no clue what it actually means for our business. Our projects always run over time and over budget. If so, talk with our friends at Brewster Consulting Group. They help build organizations that run like well-oiled machines with clear processes, reliable data and reporting, and technology that actually works for you. Their team of Six Sigma Black Belts, PMP certified project managers, seasoned data engineers have delivered solutions that are built to last for local clients like the Tulsa International Airport and Medify. They've also delivered solutions for large international enterprises like DP World. Even better, Brewster was founded and is run by a proud OSU alum and season ticket holder. Learn more about them at www.brewsterconsulting.com or learn more about their methodologies by connecting with them at Brewster Consulting Group on LinkedIn or YouTube. And the other thing we got to talk about is Eric Morris. We finally get to hear from him. Got some media. The media day came and gone. It was quick. Marshall, you had a huge day yesterday. You were down there. You got to see him face to face, ask a question. A couple of things that stood out, I guess. Number one, whenever he's talking about creating a culture, right? Building a team, recruiting a different kind of athlete, building trust, getting to know the newcomers. And what especially stood out to me was in getting to know the newcomers, some of the ways that he does that and building those relationships. I mean, eating breakfast, eating dinner with the guys, Nathan, unheard of. What did you think about that?
Definitely unheard of for the last 20 years at Oklahoma State. I'll tell you that. There was a certain hierarchy of the way that things went, but you love to hear it because this is something that like fans have been talking about for quite some time. And you go back to Chuba when he way back in the day was like, I don't have a relationship with my head coach. And let's be 100%. You're never going to have like this buddy relationship with your head coach at a university that's got 120 people on the roster. And like, you have this thing in your head that's like, hey, he was my high school history coach and you guys are buddies and you know what I mean? Like
way different in high school. Like you are the guy in high school. Of course they're going to be buddy with you in high school.
And I imagine especially now whenever you're there for 2 years at most and then you're at another school or somewhere else.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's always been a pet peeve of mine. So I needed to get that out back because it's like everyone's like, oh, it's like, yeah, because he's got 60 employees and 120 dudes on his roster and and you know what I mean? But all that being said, when you hear the coach that says like relationships matter, how do you build a roster? How do you do it quickly? Well, in your first team meeting, when you see the UNT guys on one side and the team on the other, and you make everybody get up and go switch seats and sit by somebody you don't know, and then you're telling
what
me,
is this? Remember the Titans?
It's exactly. It's like get off the bus, everybody off the bus. But to sit in like, hey, number one, we're not talking football. I want to know about you and the person. Like that means a lot to a kid, and to a person in general. That you're taking the time to do that, and then you're taking a breakfast and then a dinner. And the coaches are talking to people differently and they're learning and not assuming that kids know things, and it all is exactly what you want to hear from a coach that says we need to restart and get back to what made Oklahoma State great. This is one of those things, man. And when you're talking about like how do you, number one, have 81 new players and get everybody together on the same page, well, that's step one. And then how do you retain kids that maybe have a little bit more money or something like that? Like you see what happened and how many guys he was able to bring over and the relationship building that he's starting to do now. Like that's how you do that. And you love to hear it. And it just seems like an awesome approach.
One other thing that you mentioned, North Texas guys on one side, other guys on the other. We're truly moving on from North Texas. Marshall, I don't know what your thoughts were whenever you heard that, whenever he got in there and he literally made the statement, this is the last time I'm talking about it. We're moving on. This is Oklahoma State. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's going to be, I get what he was like trying to say. I think that's going to be tough moving forward. I just think part of this story of at least this season is going to be, hey, this was a North Texas core, even if it's just, Mestamaker and Hawkins making all the headlines and stuff like that. That's still, those guys plus Eric Morris came over. So I think that's going to be a storyline throughout the season, I guess is sort of what I'm saying. But I do get what he was trying to say is, okay, like we've got to move past this at some point, bringing the team together, making them sit by different people. I think I think it's all a positive thing to do. But I do think that throughout the year, we're all going to be pulling back at different times of the North Texas roster and stuff like that.
You remember the movie like Miracle, the Miracle on Ice story, and Coach Brooks is sitting there as they're running, or they're as they're skating, as they're doing their gassers. And he's like, after every one, he's like, who do you play for? Someone's like, Minnesota, North Dakota. And it's like, it seems kind of like that's what he's doing. Is like, okay, like this, you no longer played for, North Texas. We are Oklahoma State. We are 2026. And to your point, Marshall, especially in your line of work and everybody asking questions, they're going to be asking about Drew Mestamaker and what he did at North Texas. But the conversation needs to start changing. And I think that's kind of what he's getting at. And one thing, and Justin, I know that you saw this whenever you were there, and it really started to change. Like some of the assistant coaches asked Coach Gundy to start putting the word championship around the word, like in all the things that you're trying to do. Like you have to start talking about it to be about it. And he kind of brought that up also. Like, hey, we are a long ways from where we want to be, but we got to start somewhere, and we're starting right now. Like this is Oklahoma State. Yeah. This is what we're going to do. So
it started, I think, a little bit transition whenever you were there as well in 2009. Remember the wristbands we had, 270 from Stillwater to DFW. Like that was part of that. Like we were planning on going to play for a Big 12 championship in Dallas. Did that happen? No, but we ended up playing in the Cotton Bowl, so it kind of happened anyway. So I remember that. But then, moving forward from that, it became believe when others are doubting, because there was this hump we couldn't get over in beating OU, and then it became, we're working our butts off. We're going to make this happen. All it takes is for us to continually remember, believe. And so that's whenever, that 2011 year we beat OU.
Yeah, it's some people kind of get. People used to blast the baseball team because they always used to know they had like a moniker like our standard or whatever. Like you lose a baseball game and people would go off and whatnot. And it's not necessarily even about that, right? It's about like you verbalizing that and you saying. So it's like he did that with a purpose, so that if his players are sitting there, he's like, hey, we're no longer talking about North Texas, right? We're no longer talking about like what I did last year at North Texas, because this is the Big 12. This is Oklahoma State. This is, and so I just enjoyed that being verbalized. I think we even heard like I think like the University of Florida's new coach, like they're not even letting them put the Gator sticker on their helmets for, this spring, which fine, sure, earn it. You know what I mean? Like whatever you have to do to say, to verbalize, to show, to do these little things to back up your words and say like, guys, you're not playing unless you're the best player at your position. I don't care what Raj gave you in money. If you get beat out, you get beat out. That's on you. And then we made a bad investment. You know what I'm saying? Like those are the things that you want to hear. Always you're going to give somebody
for sure
more opportunity that maybe is making the most money. Sure. But guess what? We just saw an entire coaching staff get fired in 1 year because they didn't win a football game. You're going to play the best person at that position more often than not. And I think, you start putting that out there and then backing it up with actions. That's how you turn things around.
Yeah, and I think that he sort of already has done that. I imagine you don't immediately think to just turn the offense over at North Texas to this kid who didn't play his, high school quarterback. And then all of a sudden during his true freshman year, he's starting a bowl game. I imagine, a lot of coaches maybe wouldn't have thought to do that or thought to give Caleb Hawkins the rock as quickly as he did. Obviously he's a, true freshman last year who had one offer. So yeah, I think, whenever he said that, it doesn't matter really how much money you make. If you're the best guy, you're going to play. I think that there's already some evidence to sort of back that up just with Drew Mestamaker didn't come from a whole lot, but was obviously the best guy and got to play.
And to your point, Marshall, you bring over that many amount of guys, you bring over an entire coaching staff, you bring over even a couple more guys that played with them the year before that were at a different spot and then came back to play with them. That type of stuff doesn't happen if your words are hollow, if the things that you say don't mean what they're supposed to mean, if you go back on your word, if you don't give guys opportunities that they earn. Like, those type of things don't happen if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, right? And so I have no reason to believe that that's not going to continue at Oklahoma State. And that's one thing I think even more so, like, into the way that the teams are built today and stuff like that. Like, you get them on campus, you better do what you say you're going to do, even if they don't win the job. If they've given an opportunity and they come into you at practice and you say, like, hey man, like, I gave you the same percentage of reps as this guy and you didn't win the job. You know what I mean? Just little stuff like that. So I was really happy to hear stuff when he was talking about it.
Remember the Titans, miracle. 2026 Oklahoma State Cowboys is going to be a movie. All right, let's go. Let's go. I'm getting hyped. All right. One thing that also stood out to me, this is like a weird thing where I'm like, I'm treading carefully. I don't want this to be a hot take or anything. And nothing that Eric Morris said was wrong. But he was talking about game snaps, and it was a hill he would die on, that game reps matter more than practice reps, or what. I don't remember I'll have to go back and listen to the exact quote. That's effectively what it was. The context was there's a lot of offensive line transfers, and pretty much everybody that he listed on that group, they each have 1,000+ game reps, and that's something they very much value. I understand that. That's not even a red flag or anything, but it's like practice reps can absolutely matter whenever the competition is there. I hope that the guys, I'm sure this is the case, but we're talking about the teams that we were playing for. The scout team guys were playing every practice like it was a game. Those effectively were game reps. So there were probably game reps that happened in the Kansas game that didn't amount to anything compared to what we did in some of these practices leading up to, like, playing Texas A&M, for example. So that's the only thing where I was like, I don't know if I would die on that hill, because your practices should be to that level. Does that make sense?
I don't think so. I think he said he would stand on the table and die on the hill. So I think that the hill has a table on it.
Okay.
I think essentially what you're saying is like Penn State wrestling. Those Penn State wrestlers are so good because it's like an iron sharpens iron situation every day. They're in there. I didn't play college football. I'm not going to act like I know what goes on in practices and stuff like that. But so if that's translatable over to football, I certainly understand that. But I think it's okay to value game reps. He said, that's something that, they believed in at North Texas and it worked. He mentioned he had, whenever we went out. So they had the press conference. Then we got him out in the hallway for like another 5 minutes or so. And I forgot what the question even was, but he started talking about Cam Ward and how whenever they moved to Washington State, like he was like, I know that this kid can play at Washington. Like, I know that this is not going to be an issue for this guy. So I imagine there's also some of that goes into this. It's not just game reps. I imagine they've also got a pretty good idea of, okay, can this guy actually go or not?
Yeah, there's two things that he brought up that I think should calm your nerves a little bit, Justin.
Good. Yeah, put me in my place, Nate.
All right. Number one, he talked about competitive character being like his most important thing as a coach. And what that means to me is that you are competing in everything. I don't care if it's the first person in line at lunch, if it's your running, if it's your competitive Thursdays, if it's, whatever that may be, who's never late for weights, who's first in to stretch. Everything is a competition. And the way that he worded it is like, that's paramount to him. And that's paramount to his coaches, that you're going to compete at every single thing that you do. So I do think that they plan on making workouts and practice very much like they used to be whenever we, to your point, like that was it. Like everything you did in that weight room was a competition. You looked over there and the coaches would let you know that the guy at your position had another 10-pound plate on there rather than you did. And you're like, well, slap it on there, no matter what my card said. I think that that's what he's getting at. I do believe, though, that and this, there is a value in known And the known is like, I've seen you with live bullets. I know what I'm going to get out of you. And so I think that especially when you're talking about bringing in 81 guys and you're talking about building an entire offensive line together that never worked together, because he brought up the offensive line when he was talking about those snaps. I think that they really valued that from the standpoint of like, hey, I know Jacob Sexton has started in the SEC. I know that, he's had this many snaps. I know we're talking about these things. So now I just need to get them to work together. I don't have to wonder if they're good enough because the snaps are there and the live bullets, and I know how they're going to react in these moments. So I don't necessarily think that it's anything more than like I think he just, it's the known factor of, I know what I'm going to get out of these individuals, and there's nothing that can replicate a live bullet. I think that's the hill he's standing on. The hill that he's standing and dying on is that. So
on the table.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. Yes, the competitive culture needs to be there in every single practice rep, and you want to build that. I don't even know if we're there from a roster management standpoint yet to be able to do that. But I think that at his core, that's what he wants, because he wants to be able to bring in 25 freshmen every year and get those guys building that culture of competitiveness. If I want to play, this is what has to happen. You know what I mean? So I do think that that's there, but he values live bullets, man.
Yeah. And I was probably missing context in some form or fashion by being between meetings and scarfing down a sandwich for lunch and just being like, wait, what did he just say? And, so I think that was something that was good to talk through, but it's like, yeah, he definitely is like,
well,
not valuing game reps necessarily higher than, any other competition.
I think it's fair for yourself and any other Oklahoma State fan to be jaded when you start talking about that, because as we know, how Coach Gundy did things was not always how people loved. It's like, hey, this kid's clearly better, but this kid's been here longer, so I'm going to give him a shot. Or even go back to 2 years ago when he was like, well, we're going to run it back because every single offensive lineman, and we all know that was kind of smoke and mirrors, and they were so happy with those snaps and things like that. And it's like, well, this isn't necessarily good snaps.
No, that's a great call out. That's exactly where my mind went whenever I initially heard that. Was
So
those game reps don't really mean that all that
so
much.
I figured that was the case, and I was like, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think this is exactly that.
Yeah. Receiver room, Marshall, this is where you had your chance to shine. Was this your first question that you got to ask Coach Morris?
This was mine and Eric Morris's first ever speaking of each other, because during his introductory press conference, it was crazy. We had like 15 minutes with him. I'm really bad in the press conference setting of like talking over people, so I just like usually my social awkwardness just sort of shuts down, and I just wait until there's a nice long pause before I start to talk. But I got my question in here. Just sort of wanted to know, there wasn't a ton of personnel talk because there's so much going on within the program that's new that people want to ask him. But I asked him about just the receiver room that they've assembled. Obviously, not only getting Wyatt Young, but getting Justin Bowick, getting Chris Barnes. He mentioned that he chuckled to himself earlier that day because the two were walking out of a meeting together, and Barnes is 5'7" and Bowick is 6'4". So he was like, it's just sort of funny that those two guys have the same job technically.
Story of my life.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we've got going on here between me and Nathan. So close enough.
And then, he mentioned that Bowick, I think the exciting part that he mentioned about Bowick is like, this dude's a freak in Oklahoma State's style of offense. Like NFL people are going to want to watch, what he does. And he mentioned that he was Illinois' leading touchdowns receptions leader. And that he said that Oklahoma State's going to use him almost entirely different than the way that he was using in that offense. And he's really excited about it. And he mentioned Barnes, obviously, his speed, the numbers that they get with their GPS stuff. He's like, this guy is like already sort of clearly the fastest dude on the team. Goes off listing other guys like Israel Polk and stuff like that. And him still being the play caller, he's like, I got to find a way to get all these guys on the field. So, I think in terms of depth and really good depth as well, Wyatt Young, Chris Barnes, and Justin Bowick, all 4-star transfer receivers. That's a room that I'm super excited about. It's starting to look, sort of like those wide receiver rooms that Oklahoma State had before Dunn took over play calling duties as well. And it was sort of just the receivers coach, and they were really good.
Yeah, that's a great room, man. I think in the running back room, he kind of brought up just a touch too. You're talking about guys that he knows, he's familiar with, know the system. You got a young guy in Katie Jones that's going to be learning on the fly from those guys. You got, 3 guys with a lot of carries at the college level. which I think these are all great problems, right? It's like, how are you going to share the workload? I did find that interesting, Marshall, when you talked about that. One of the things, you sold a guy to come here after leading his team at Illinois in touchdowns, saying, I'm going to use you completely differently than you were. Like, it's kind of exciting to me to be able to see that, right? Because he was used in a limited capacity. Like, he was very red zone centric, very contested catch tight in the middle of the field was really what they did a lot with him at Illinois. The coaches are like, yeah, we're going to expand your game. I think that's such a big selling point for recruiting, in being able to say that and then show it and do it. And he talked about how they feel like they're kind of behind the 8 ball with the 27 class. No better recruiting tool than to go out there and to show out and do it. So it was pretty cool to hear him talk about that.
2 other quick highlights before we wrap it up today. Number one, even the former teammates, former football guys, they loved hearing that, essentially he's just got a mattress, a towel, and some bottles of water laying around because he's just locked in right now, not even worried about moving his family here. He's just focused on getting stuff done. So, Eve Batoba mentioned, we got a menace as a head coach. So yeah, good to hear from that perspective. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Holgerson, maybe a little bit. And then the last big highlight that I think everybody's going to be fired up about is that he mentioned we're going to have a spring game. So about April 18th, something like that, here in a couple of months, something to get fired up about, so we can see these guys in action, as well as, Marshall, you might be able to see a little bit before then with some open practices potentially, which would be great as well. But the fact that we have a spring game, I don't know, we haven't had one in a while. Does it do anything for you, Nate? Or are you just like, yeah, whatever?
I'm kind of like, I've always been kind of, yeah, whatever on spring games. Now, I will say,
as a fan, because I feel like as a former player,
well, as a former player, that's my time to shine right there.
100%, yeah.
I know I'm getting snaps.
Exactly.
No, as a fan, I also as a player, understanding that like how they split it up, how they make the teams, what plays get put in, what defenses get put in versus what plays.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like all that going in, and so it's like, oh my God, I won't say a name, but there was a running back that was on the team when we were both there, and he had a great spring game. A great spring game. The guy was never going to play. I don't mean that in a rude way. Like, you had Kendall Hunter, you had Keith Toston, you had all these guys in front. And I just remember, like, he went into the coach's office after that and was like, Coach, I need carries. And Coach about spit out his Pepsi on the table. And so it's like, you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Like, hey, it's football. You're out there. You want to see a new offense. You just want to see guys fly around. They're going to be put in situations. They're going to be put in positions that are not realistic to what is going to happen in the fall. So, yes, I'm excited about it from that standpoint, but I never take too much from it in a way of like, ooh, he's going to be awesome moving forward. You know what I mean? I don't know.
It's fair. It's fair.
It seems like there's always a receiver who comes out of the spring game and it's like, that guy's going to go off this year. And sometimes it's like, they sort of did, and sometimes not so much. There's been so many different iterations of what a spring game looks like under Mike Gundy. Sometimes it was spring practice. Sometimes they did some 7-on. Sometimes it was sort of a spring game. So I'm intrigued by how different this looks. I'm obviously going to go to it. It's my job. But yeah, I think that the spring game doesn't do a ton for me, but I'm open to what a more spring game looks like and sort of figuring it out.
If I had my pick as a fan and as somebody who just loves watching football, if I could pick, I would much rather watch practice and how things are structured and how guys go through drills, and then watch them like in a team live, 1s, 2s, 3s, and then go back and then, watch one-on-ones with wide receivers and DBs. And I'd love to watch inside drill when they split it up. And personally, I would get a lot. I think you'd learn so much more about your team, about who steps up and who does what in those situations. And then I don't know. I think that's a much more competitive setting. So if I had my druthers rather than a game that's drummed up and put together, but I get it. It is what it is. But here, hold on. Before we move on, why can we not? And I think it would be so much more beneficial. I think you'd make a whole lot more money. I think you'd learn a whole lot more about your team why could we not get Arkansas State and do a live scrimmage and just get everybody in like you want to get in? You know, like the NFL preseason, you know, you practice, Cowboys and Rams practice on a Wednesday. You got a Friday to Saturday preseason game. I don't know why you can't do that. You would make so much more money. You'd be able to give a school like an Arkansas State actual money, half the gate or whatever it may be. I just feel like even something like that, I would enjoy so much more than watching split squads. But I don't know.
Yeah. Good stuff as always. Listeners, we do appreciate you. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating review, it helps out the channel. Love that. If you're watching on YouTube, like, share, subscribe to show your support. We will see you next time. Keep those pistols firing and remember to reload. Go Pokes.